with us this afternoon. My name is Maxine Gaines, and I'm going to be spending the next 2 hours chatting with you on Live at the Waterhole. Really excited for another session of Live at the Waterhole. We had a very brief appearance yesterday of what I think was probably Marips at the Juma feed, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what today is going to bring. We're starting with Shalati in the Kruger National Park. This is a camera right near the Skakuza rest camp on the Sabi River, and we've got a lovely little pod of hippos here with what looks like possibly some oxpeckers. At this distance, a little bit difficult to say, but it could be oxpeckers on the back of those hippos. The river looks like it's flowing fairly strongly. You can see the currents in the water there. Oh, let's see, some of those could be starlings actually. It looks like some of them are oxpeckers, but there's a couple of them that look a bit darker, so they might, the ones right at the back, it might just be the way the light's hitting them, but they could be starlings. Now please remember to join in with us in the discussion. Send us your questions, comments, discussion topics, anything that you might want to chat about. We'd love to hear from you. It's you that makes these shows the interesting shows that they are, with all of your questions and comments. So please join us. Please send in all those questions and comments so that we can have a great conversation together. Okay, let's see. What are these birds now? Actually, all of them do look like oxpeckers, I think. Those ones that I thought were starlings was just the way the light was hitting them at the back. But now that I see them here, they all look like they are red-billed oxpeckers. So I'm sure most of you know that you get two species of oxpeckers in the Kruger area, the yellow-billed and the red-billed. Red-billed are more common, but the yellow-bills are making a comeback. And you often see them on the buffalo herds. That's the species I've seen yellow bills on the most, is buffalo. Starting to see them on the odd giraffe every now and then now, but mostly on buffalo. These chaps look like red-billed ox. Oh, actually, no, I think it's just the way the light hit that beak. I think it is a red-billed oxpecker. For a second, it looked like a flash of yellow on the beak, but I think it was just the light reflecting off. Those hippos look very relaxed. I've always said I probably would like to be a hippo. If I had to choose any animal that I needed to come back as in another life, hippos seem to have quite a nice life, just lolling around in the water all day and eating all night. I am oversimplifying their lives dramatically in that statement. I know they do have a tough time, especially when there's drought, and obviously when there's competition for water, they can fight and do some serious damage to each other. But they really do just look like they have a wonderful time when you drive past and they're sleeping in the water. Catherine, lovely to have you on board with us again this afternoon. Yeah, you're a real regular, and it's wonderful to have you with us every day. Always look forward to your questions and comments. Tim has asked, are the red parts of the hippo sunburn? It's not really sunburn as much as that's just the coloration of their skin. They have quite pinkish skin in some areas. Obviously, the back bit that is exposed to the sun the most has got a bit of melanin, which gives it that darker appearance. And then the underneath, which is normally kind of hidden from the sun in the water, is quite pink because it doesn't need as much melanin. And then hippos also have a pinkish color to their sweat, which is kind of acts a bit like a sunscreen for them, the pigment in the sweat. So that can also make them look a little bit pinkish. Wow, Catherine, you say that it is nice to warm up virtually at the waterholes because you've got snow coming there this afternoon. Wow. Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's hot in South Africa today and most parts of the country, but it's nice. It's a very pleasant temperature. Greetings, Mercedes Bean. Lovely to have you with us this afternoon as well. That little one seems to be, I don't know if it's smelling something on the back of the larger hippo, or maybe it was tasting something. So sweet, look at that. Practicing for when he's a big boy. So Jane is asking, at what age do they grow teeth? Jane, I think those little ones will already have teeth. The teeth can erupt quite quickly, probably in the first couple of months of their lives, just like with human babies. You know, before they're even a year, they have teeth starting to come. And it would be the same with the hippo. Obviously, the males get those massive, what we call tusks. They're not really tusks, they are just massive teeth. And so that, you know, as they reach sexual maturity, those teeth will really start to grow. But these little ones will already have teeth. They will already be supplementing their milk diet with grass. And so in order to do that, they need to have teeth from quite an early age. So by about 3 months of age, they'll be eating grass, obviously still suckling from mum. Hippos have quite a very rich milk, but they will certainly be eating grass or starting to eat grass by about 3 months of age, if not a little bit sooner. Must be a nice time of the year for the hippos now as the water holes start to fill up and the levels of water in the river rise, and there's just more places for them to go. So there's not nearly as much competition over the available water spots, and so far less chance of being injured in fights with other hippos. So summer's a good time to be a hippo. And also they don't have to travel nearly as far at night once the nice fresh green grass starts coming through. You know, when there's drought times or times of lower grazing, hippos are some of the first animals to really start showing signs of starvation because of lack of food. Forest Green, you ask, how does one tell the difference between males and females? It can be quite tricky when they're in the water like this. Obviously, when they're out, you can kind of look in the obvious places between the legs. But when they're in the water, Because of the size of the teeth of a male hippo, those large tusks, when they close their mouths, there's normally a very prominent bump just behind the nostril area. And so you can generally tell a male from a female by looking for that bump behind the nostril. And the male has a very prominent bump there because of the size of the teeth. You know, when he closes his mouth, those teeth don't stick out of the mouth. They're contained within the mouth, but they push up on that top lip area. And so there's a very distinctive bump there that you can see behind the nostrils. I don't see a very distinctive bump on any of these hippo, or maybe on the furthest one. Looks like there could be a bit of a bump there. Might be a youngish male. He doesn't look particularly big. But yeah, that is the best way when they're in the water, is just to look for that bump. Also, if you see a group of hippos in the water, males are markedly bigger than females. So if you're looking at a group, look for the biggest one, and it's probably a male. And then once you've found him, once you found what you think is the male, just look for that bump when he lifts his head up out of the water. And it's kind of the bump that I'm talking about is behind the nostril, kind of between the nostril and the eye. You should see a prominent bump there. Got another question coming through here. How many males are there in one pod, and are they super territorial? That's from Alex. Alex, they are very territorial. Hippos will definitely defend quite aggressively a little patch of water. Once they leave the water, they kind of lose those very aggressive territorial tendencies, because they kind of have to go and find grazing, and they might have to cross over the area of another male. So it's really when they're in the water that they become very aggressive. Oh, I'm jumping around here a bit, but that definitely looks like it could be a male. I don't know if you can see the bump there that I'm talking about between the kind of bump of the eyebrow ridge and the nostril. You can see another bump there, and it's always very prominent in the males. So yes, hippos are very territorial in the water, and a dominant male will have his pod of females, and he won't really allow another dominant male close. Or he certainly won't allow another sexually mature male close. He will chase that other male off. Sometimes in a big enough waterhole, you might find you'll have your male with his pod of females, and then kind of hanging around in the same waterhole but keeping a very respectful distance. You may find some other males, especially as the waterholes start to dry up and become less and smaller in winter. Some of these other males are forced to inhabit the same waterholes as a dominant male, and then they'll just be very submissive. They don't, male hippos can do serious damage and kill each other in fights. So a male that knows that he is outgunned by another male will, because he has to in winter or in the dry season, he might share a little patch of water, but he'll keep his distance and he'll act very submissive, and then that will probably be acceptable to the dominant male. Hi, Colin Eames. Yes, thank you. You said have a good time today. I'm sure we're all going to have a good time at the waterholes. I think the weather's a little different today at most of the places, not as much rain as we had yesterday, but the rain was lovely yesterday. There was still a lot going on, especially with the birds and the elephants. Lovely to see the Sabi River flowing so strongly. And there's what looks like a little group of waterbuck, being true to their name, found close to the water. Almost looks like they're grazing on the Phragmites reeds there or something, which quite coarse grazing material, not very nutritious. But I suppose at this time of the year when there's still, the green grass is starting to come through, but it's not as thick and lush as it is going to be later in the year. So these waterbuck might need to utilize the Phragmites reeds. Oh, and there's a little impala with them. A couple of waterbuck and an impala. This, you saw the vehicle in the background there. This camera points towards the low-level bridge which crosses the Sabi River as you leave Skukuza camp. So that's what you're seeing is the tourists on that low-level bridge, which during times of heavy flood you can't cross. So Tabu's asking if the buck and the hippo will ever butt heads. Very unusual. It wouldn't normally happen. They tend to, have a mutual respect for each other and leave each other alone. I have seen hippos getting quite aggressive with other animals coming down to drink, and kind of, thrashing their heads around and splashing water. And that normally happens in the peak of the dry season when these water holes are very small, when the hippo doesn't really have a lot of room to escape anything coming down to the edge, and can just get a little bit more antsy and intolerant of other species coming down to drink. But you very rarely ever see a hippo attacking an antelope that might come down to drink. They might show a little bit of, show whatever's coming down to drink that they're not happy with them coming down, but they'll do that mainly by thrashing around in the water and thrashing their head around. And sometimes that's enough to intimidate whatever it is to back off or leave. But remember, in the dry season, which is normally when you observe that behavior, times can be quite desperate, and the antelope are just as desperate for water as the hippos are. On the, looking at that question from a different perspective, I have seen hippos getting in between crocodiles and antelope, so almost to the point that they look like they are stopping the crocodile from attacking an antelope. And there have even been records, video records, so lots of evidence of hippos when a crocodile actually has an antelope, of the hippo moving towards the crocodile and either attacking the crocodile or intimidating it enough that it lets the prey go, and then the hippo's kind of moving the prey to the side. So that has been recorded on numerous occasions. It almost seems as if the hippo's wanting to help the antelope. And very, you can read many reports on that. No one really seems to understand why they would do that. Some people say it might be, displacement behavior, maybe a female hippo that's lost a calf, or just feeling very defensive because they have a calf. When they have calves, they obviously really don't like crocodiles, and they will do their best to chase them away. So that might be a reason for that. But certainly that has been recorded on numerous occasions as hippos actually helping out antelope species. We always learn. There's always something new and interesting, and something that isn't in the textbooks when you spend enough time watching these animals. A little blacksmith lapwing enjoying the water. Okay, well, we're going to leave these hippos for now. We may pop back here and see what they're up to later in the show, but we're going to go across to Tau now and see what's happening at the waterhole there. we've got a nice little group of female waterbuck relaxing. And in the foreground, a couple of Egyptian geese. And what is that other bird that's standing very still at the edge of the water? It looks the way it's standing like it could be a heron of some description. And those waterbuck look super chilled. I always wonder where they're finding enough food when we look at this waterhole, though, because it really looks very, very depleted of food for quite some distance around it. I know they do sometimes walk into the water and feed on the green vegetation there. Well, welcome, Harriet. You say you are in a warm but very windy Cape Town. Lovely to have you on board with us. It's actually quite windy in a lot of the country today. A lot of the parts of the country is windy. Maybe bringing us some more frontal weather, not sure. Interesting how two of those waterbucks seem to be very snoozy. The one's got its head right down, the one's got its eyes closed, and the one seems to be kind of ruminating, chewing the cud, and just a little bit more alert. And they'll probably take it in turns to watch out for potential predators. Here comes another female. Can't quite make it. Is standing at the edge of the water. The way it's standing, so backed heron, or what we know now as a striated heron, but I just can't. Although, oh, the forehead there looks quite white. Struggling to ID it from that distance. So we've got a question here from Tulasile asking if hippos are ruminants or non-ruminants. So hippos are definitely non-ruminants. They don't chew the cud and they don't have the four-chambered stomach, which is typical of ruminants. So their digestive system is not nearly as good as a ruminant's because the ruminants have the four-chambered stomach, and because of the fact that they re-chew their food, really grind it up to be able to extract all the nutrients out of it. They have they can afford to eat less because they're getting all the nutrients possible out of the food that they eat. Whereas things like elephants, rhino, and hippo predominantly, zebra also, they have to eat bulk. They have to eat a lot because they just don't get as many nutrients out of the food that they ingest. Zebras get a little bit more than elephants, rhino, and hippo because of being hindgut fermenters. So there's a fermentation process that happens in the hindgut there, which helps them extract some more nutrients. But yeah, the bulk grazers, the large bulk grazers, your elephants, your rhinos, hippos, and remember, elephants aren't only grazers, but they do eat, especially in summer, a large portion of their diet is grass. But all of those kind of bulk eating herbivores, the reason that they have to eat so much is because their digestive system is so poor in terms of nutrient extraction. Yeah, Greg says it's looking pretty dry around this waterhole. I agree, it really is looking dry. Oh, there's a blue wildebeest walking past. Yeah, I think, Madikwe Game Reserve is right up in the northwest of the country and tends to get its rainfall a little bit later than the east. And it doesn't get as much rainfall normally as places like the Kruger Park, the Sabi Sands, down towards northern KwaZulu-Natal where Tembe is. The rainfall there is higher and the rainfall comes earlier in the season. So I don't think that Tau Game Lodge and Madikwe Game Reserve would have had much rain yet this season. But it's looking promising if you look at the sky there. The clouds have built up quite nicely. I see we've got Spaz Ivankov joining us from Bulgaria this afternoon. Welcome. Welcome. It's far away. And you say it's very cold and windy there. I wish we could share our warm weather with you. Couple of little, looks like black craics bobbing around on the edge of the water there. They're always lovely to see with their luminous yellow beaks and luminous pink legs. Oh, nice male waterbuck. Look how the female's staring at the water before she approaches. Listening, looking, being very cautious. Lala's asking, are there any crocs in the area? Yes, I think there are some crocs at this waterhole. Haven't seen any today. Oh, there's a little skink or something crawling behind the waterbuck there. That was quite cute. It had a very long tail, whatever species of skink that was. A skink is a kind of a lizard, member of the lizard family. See how long she stands there before she decides to make her way into the water to graze. Oh, there's actually lots going on at this waterhole today. Is that a spoonbill or what is that? It looked like it had a bit of a pinkish tinge to it. A bird in the background there. I didn't get a good look. Lots of waterbuck. Tundi's asking if oxpeckers ever sit on waterbuck. Very rarely, Tundi. I have seen them, but it's not common, and I think it could have a lot to do with their fluffy coats. I think it's much more difficult for an oxpecker to comb that beak through the longer hair to get at the ticks that they're looking for. And so I think in many ways it's not worthwhile for them to sit on waterbuck. So every now and then I have seen oxpeckers on waterbuck, but you certainly don't see it in the numbers and as regularly as you would with other antelope species. And Byron is asking if waterbuck shed their coats in the summer to become thinner and thicker in the winter. I've never noticed that a waterbuck's coat looks thinner in summer and thicker in winter. I don't think we have the kinds of extremes of temperature that you get in the the less tropical parts of the world. And so there really isn't a necessity for them to shed that coat in winter and, I mean, in summer, and then grow a thicker one in winter. And I can't say that I've ever looked at a waterbuck in summer and thought, well, that looks, his coat looks a lot thinner or a lot shorter. It's pretty much the same year round. I think that coat is more to do with waterproofing them because of the amount of time that they spend in the water. And they have other means of waterproofing themselves with oily skin secretions as well. But I think the length of the coat is probably more to do with waterproofing than to do with thermoregulation or with keeping them hot or cold or warm. Matthew's asking if the ducks migrate when the water dries out. Matthew, yes, a number of our duck species are nomadic, so they may not migrate as such. There's a difference between nomadic. So migratory species specific the year in response to kind of a change in the daylight, in the length of daylight. And so it's normally in response to winter or summer that they would then migrate to another part of the globe. Whereas nomadic species don't have a specific time move. It all just depends on the availability of the resources that are there at the time. And so if the water dries up, they'll fly somewhere, find where there is some water. But they don't have a very specific pattern to those movements. It is very variable from one year to another and from season to season. But yes, many of species or the waterbird species would be nomadic, and they would move as and when the water is no longer available or becomes polluted or has no more food in it or just dries up completely. Spaz is asking if I've ever seen a yellow-billed oxpecker on a waterbuck. And I can honestly say I've never seen a yellow-billed oxpecker on a waterbuck. I've very rarely seen red-billed oxpeckers on waterbuck. I have never seen a yellow-billed oxpecker on a waterbuck. It could also have to do with the smell. They definitely have a very we were talking today live at the waterhole. You can smell a waterbuck before you've seen it, and it's a very specific smell. You can't confuse it with anything else. So if you're walking or driving in the bush and the wind is blowing in the right direction, you will smell a waterbuck. It definitely has a smell that it carries around with it constantly. It's not a smell related to its feces. It's from that oily secretion on the skin. And that might be off-putting to the oxpeckers. I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone's ever done any research on whether that smell, attracts or detracts certain species from landing on the waterbuck. It would be an interesting study to do. I would be interested to know whether it stops kind of biting flies or mosquitoes and things like that from biting them. But certainly it may have a little bit to do with the smell, but I think it also definitely has a lot to do with the hair, because that oxpeckers, the way that they kind of comb through the hair of the shorter coated antelope is very very specific, and I don't think it would work as well on these waterbuck with their longer hair. But yeah, it would be an interesting study to do. Okay, well, we're going to leave the waterbuck peacefully grazing in the water, and let's head over to Tembe in northern KwaZulu-Natal and see what's happening at the African location there. Oh, I've got a little bachelor herd of impala. Oh, that's interesting. It's an unusual time of the year for the impala to be sparring with each other. In northern KZN, that normally April. April's the rutting season. I don't often see them behaving like this in November, December. You can hear the white-faced whistling ducks in the background there. Yeah, all three of these boys are looking like they're looking for trouble with each other today, which is very strange for this time of the year. George, I suppose it could be a friendly, playful fight. It's definitely not as intense as I've seen impala fights get during the rutting season. And it'd be a case of, let's just start to understand who's more dominant, who's the boss. And often they will have that dominant structure worked out before the rutting season starts. And so it could very well be a case of let's just see, let's just test each other's strength a bit. It's definitely not getting particularly intense. That one looked like it was even vocalizing at the other one, that it's a very distinctive sound, a roar. When you first hear it, if you're walking around the bush or driving around the bush, it can sound a little bit like an alarm call, but it goes on for longer. It's not a short burst like the alarm calls are. It is a very distinctive mating season sound. There's the Diedrich's cuckoo calling, a beautiful bird. Very difficult to find, vocal, but not that easy to see. One of the species that the Diedrich's cuckoo parasitize because they lay their eggs in other birds' nests. And main species parasitize is sociable weavers. And sociable weavers often have their kind of breeding colonies of nests hanging over the water. So waterholes are a typical area where you would hear the Diedrich's cuckoos calling at this time of the year. And they'll hang around the waterholes and look for potential weavers, and then sometimes even follow them back to their colonies and hide, waiting for a chance to lay their egg in an unsuspecting weaver's nest. So Lele is saying it's starting to look dangerous. What could they be fighting about? I think at this stage of the probably are just figuring out who's the strong herd, practicing for the upcoming rutting season, which will hit 5 months' time or so. And just really getting a feel for who's who, who's strong, who's not as strong. I have read somewhere, and I haven't read a lot about this, so I'm not sure how true it is, but I do remember reading somewhere that as the female impalas are starting to give birth, the hormones that are kind of coursing through them in preparation for giving birth can sometimes almost confuse the males, and there can be almost a bit of a false rut as the males sense the estrogen and the hormones in these females as they're about to give birth. So that could also be possibly what's happening here. But in the full rutting season, these fights can get really quite dramatic, quite intense. This definitely doesn't look particularly intense. Colin's asking if it's right to assume that a male buck could have 20 odd females. Colin, it does vary quite a lot, depending obviously on the overall population of impala in an area. But I have seen herds of, probably 60 or 70 females with one male. So it just depends on the sex ratio and how, the overall population. A male is never going to be able to hold that many females for that long, especially during the rutting season. He spends so much time fighting and chasing other males around that his condition drops quite rapidly. He doesn't spend nearly enough time feeding and looking after himself and grooming himself and getting rid of ticks. And so one male would never mate with that many females. He might hold a herd that size for a short period of time, but then he is going to be ousted by another male who comes in and is, has been looking after himself and is just that little bit stronger. And then that new male will then mate with some of the females in the herd, and then the process happens all over again. He spends too much time mating and fighting and chasing other males, and he then gets ousted. So within one herd of females in a breeding season, you normally will have a number of different males that have fathered the lambs in that herd, which is just a way, nature's way of making sure that genetic diversity is as high as it can be. Catherine's asking about brood parasitism, whether cuckoos lay their eggs in the same species of nests that they were raised by. And Catherine, all the evidence does seem to suggest that. So, certain species of brood parasites are very specific about what types of or what species of birds they parasitize. And others, like many of the cuckoos, are quite Catholic in their taste. One species of cuckoo might parasitize a number of different species of other birds, but some of the latest research does indicate that a cuckoo that has been raised by a certain species will go back to that species when it is going to lay its own eggs. And that's probably because of, imprinting as a youngster. It learnt that species, it learnt the call of that species, it understands the habits of that species, and so it then lays its eggs in the same species nest. So yes, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that that is what happens. A little group of Inyala there in the background. One of my favorite antelope species. They are so pretty. Very common in KwaZulu-Natal. In fact, in some game reserves that you visit in northern Zululand, you almost see more Inyala than Impala. Looks quite windy there. You can see the vegetation being blown around. Typical behavior shown by these two different species of antelope here, with the Nyala kind of hugging the thickets and the Impalas out in the open. Nadine is asking how closely related Impala and Nyala are. Well, I think it's Impala and Nyala that you're referring to. So not closely related at all. The Impala belong to a genus called Epiceros. Their Latin name is Epiceros melampus, and they are actually the only species within that genus. So they have no close relatives, whereas the Nyala are part of the Tragelaphidie, or the genus Tragelaphus, which is the spiral-horned antelope. So the closest relatives of a Nyala that you would be familiar with maybe from Live at the Waterhole and Wild Earth Safari Live would be things like kudu, bushbuck. There are many other species of that genus around. There's Sitatunga up in Botswana, in the kind of swampy areas. They're very well adapted to moving through swampy, wet areas. And other members of the genus would include things like the mountain Inyala, the bongo, the eland, just trying to think, well, lesser kudu. The Tragelaphus genus has a number of members, but certainly the Nyala is not related to the Impala, even though the females have quite similar colouring, that rich kind of reddish colour of the Impala, and the female Nyalas look similar, but they're not closely related at all. Spaz is asking what cuckoo species would be recorded at Tembe. So I go up to that area quite a lot, Spaz, and I'm just trying to think. Certainly Klaas's cuckoo and Diedrich's cuckoo at this time of the year are very common. The black cuckoo you hear calling a lot, red-chested cuckoo in the summer. Let me think, Levalence and Jack cuckoos you'd get there as well. What else have I seen up in that area quite regularly? Just trying to think. I think in summer the common cuckoo comes through a little bit. I haven't been counting how many species I've said. But yes, there are a number of different cuckoo species that you would find in that part of the country. I don't think I've ever seen a great spotted cuckoo up there, but they do occur. They certainly do occur up there. And I'm just trying to think. Last year there was wondering if it was, I think there may have been a thick-billed cuckoo that was recorded in that northern Zululand area caused quite a stir with people coming from all over to see it. I think also in that northern Zululand area, there have been the odd sighting of common cuckoo. Madagascar cuckoo's been spotted in that area recently. So yeah, there are many different species of cuckoos that pop up there. But the common ones that you would see would be Klaas's cuckoo, Diedrich's cuckoo, red-chested cuckoo, black cuckoo. Those, I think, would be the ones that you'd see most commonly in that area. I say see, but you hear them far more often than you see them. Cuckoos are notoriously cryptic creatures. They keep themselves hidden, which is partially, I would say, because of the fact that they are brood parasites. The other birds know that, and the other birds hate them. So they try and stay hidden and stay out of sight from their potential host species. But Tembe is a wonderful birding destination for those of you that are keen on birds. It really is incredible, the species diversity of birds up in that part of the country, which is very close to the Mozambican border, right up in northern KwaZulu-Natal. And really the species diversity of birds up there is quite special. There's some endemic species there that you don't see elsewhere. I'm talking things like Neogard sunbirds, Rhadzopalis. There's some beautiful species up there that are quite distinct to that area. So anyone keen on birding, it's a lovely spot to go to. Anyway, we are going to head over to Hyena Pan and see what is happening there. Hyena Pan in Botswana. Ah, and true to its name, Hyena Pan has presented us with a hyena cooling itself off in the water. Hyenas love water. Oh, he's just changing positions now so he can wet his other side. I'm saying he. I can't see at this distance whether it is a male or female. But I hate calling animals it. So we'll stick with he for now, unless I get a good look. Having a yawn there. It's obviously been a long, hard night for this hyena, and he's enjoying his relax in the water. Looks quite young if I look at the ears. The ears are intact. They don't seem to have too many nicks or scars or battle battle wounds. It's often a good indicator of age in predators, is to just look at the margin of the ear. This pan always seems to have Cape turtle doves, or ringneck doves as they're now known, calling in the background. Such a lovely soothing sound. Peter Green is asking if hyenas usually travel alone. Peter, not necessarily. They're normally found in clans, but members of a clan will not always be with the clan. They will sometimes go foraging alone, go hunting alone, and males especially tend to spend time alone, and away from the rest of the clan. So there's a good chance that this hyena is a male, but it's not certain. I really didn't get a good enough look, and without the benefits of another hyena around to compare sizes with, it is really guesswork. You can, if you get a really good look at the tip of a penis or the pseudo penis of a hyena. The pseudo penis of a female looks very similar to a male's, but there is a slight difference on the tip. So if you get a good look at that, you can sex them. But it's not an exact science. Many very knowledgeable guides have got it wrong, including myself. Yeah, it's Spaz is saying it's great to see this hyena again. You think you've seen this hyena here before. That would make sense. They are very territorial, so it would make sense that the same clan and the same individuals would be visiting this waterhole. So there's a good chance that this is a regular visitor, and it definitely does look like a youngster. Just looking at those ears, as I said, very clean ears, and doesn't look particularly big. Charlotte is saying that you saw a discussion online today about whether you get the olive thrush in Gauteng or not. It's actually the Karoo thrush. Yes, in Gauteng you generally do get the Karoo thrush, even though you aren't that close to the Karoo, but the Karoo thrush's distribution stretches right up into Gauteng. That's correct, Charlotte. And if you look at the distribution of those species, you generally find that the Karoo thrush has more of a westerly distribution, and the olive thrush more easterly, although the distributions do overlap quite a bit in some areas. But if you mean in Gauteng, kind of around Johannesburg, Pretoria areas, then it's definitely the Karoo thrush that you're seeing, and not the olive thrush, which tends to be a little bit further east. Those lapwings in the background don't seem very happy. Maybe something's disturbing them. There might be something else coming down to the water. It's so interesting to me that hyenas love to do this, and yet you very seldom see cats doing this. A lion or a leopard, it would be very unusual to see them lying around in a puddle of water. And yet I'm sure they feel the same heat. They're affected by the heat just as much as the hyenas are. The hyenas just have this habit of lolling around in water puddles, whereas the cats don't. And I don't really know the reason for it. I don't really understand the reason for it. He's very alert though, this boy. Having a good relax, but still keeping a good look around him, constantly moving his head, moving his ears, and making sure he's not caught by surprise by something else coming down to the water. I can definitely hear something else there. Could be an elephant, I'm not sure what it is. There's definitely something else moving around, and something that disturbed the lapwings. We might have some elephants causing a bit of noise. I can definitely hear something else moving around there. Seems this camera is a little bit unstable, so let's head back to Tembe in the meantime. Hopefully the situation with this camera will improve and we can come back here. Oh, hello. Another species just relaxing at the water. And that looks like a red-billed oxpecker as well. On the back of that impala, I think. Sometimes these camera angles make it a little bit difficult to see the detail, not like if you have your binoculars, but it definitely looks like red-billed oxpeckers to me. In Zululand, the yellow-billed oxpecker is becoming a little bit more common, but you don't see nearly as many of them as you are starting to see now in the Kruger. But they are around. They are making a comeback there as well. They were very badly affected by cattle dipping and farmers trying to control ticks on their cattle with very, very poisonous substances. And since those pesticides and cattle dips have changed, and since the education has got around that that's actually really bad for the oxpeckers, they are making a comeback, which is great. Oh, there's a little chick with that African jacana. How cute! And the jacana is, interestingly, sifting through the elephant dung. That's not something you see often with jacanas. They are insectivorous birds, and normally you find them hawking insects right on the water, at the side of the water. I've very seldom. There are other species that you see often sifting through elephant dung. I'm thinking of things like spurfowls and francolins, and hornbills do it a lot. But this is something that you don't regularly see with jacanas, so it's fascinating behavior. And this will be a male, having a chick with it. The jacanas are polyandrous, which means that the female has many males, and she will lay eggs. She will mate with many males, and she will lay eggs in all of their nests. And the males are the ones that raise the chicks. The females don't help with raising the chicks at all. So the fact that this jacana here has a chick with it means that it is a male jacana. So Spencer's asking, at what stage does the female leave the jacana chick? Does she ever hang around? She does not hang around, and as far as I'm aware, she does not play any role in even sitting on the eggs. So she lays her eggs, and then she moves on to mate with another male and lay some more eggs in a different nest. And it's the male that exclusively looks after the eggs and raises the chicks. And that's a very unusual breeding strategy in birds. It's not the norm. So Farai is asking, if oxpeckers went extinct, how would it affect herbivores? I think it would be really bad news for herbivores, Farai. Some species would be worse affected than others. Something like this impala that we're looking at here, they have a kind of a comb-like structure to their teeth on the side of the jaw, and they are actually more towards the front of the jaw, but they are capable of kind of combing through each other's hair and their own hair, and getting rid of skin parasites and ticks that way. So you don't often see impala riddled with ticks, but certain other species can be quite riddled with ticks, and without the help of oxpeckers keeping those tick loads down, they would get anemic, and they would probably succumb to the various tick-borne diseases that many of these ticks carry. So it would not be good news for herbivores, if or many of the herbivore species, if oxpeckers went extinct. It would be a real problem. Oh, look at that. That's something you don't see very often. The impala putting his head down like that for a real proper rest. I suppose those horns must get quite heavy. Needs to just rest his neck a bit. That's so cute. Would a pregnant female impala sit in that position? I have no idea. The way he's sitting there, it almost looks like his belly's a little bit sideways, but I suppose it might be quite uncomfortable for a pregnant female to lie like that with those big, big bellies, especially now where the bellies are really very big and it's very close to the birthing time for these impalas. So Riley, yeah, probably unusual to see a pregnant female impala lying like that. It's unusual to see a male impala lying like that. It's very cute. He's really having a good rest. But you can see still he's still alert. So even when he was lying like that, you know, his ears were still flicking around, and he's obviously now got his head up again, looking at something. And now he's gonna, oh, so sweet, put his head down again. It's very unusual to see impalas doing this, especially one who doesn't appear to be surrounded by a herd. Maybe there are other impala around. We're quite zoomed in, but you know, for impala, safety in numbers is so important. The herd look after each other. Not necessarily, you know, because of any altruistic tendencies, but just because the more eyes and ears there are, the more chances there are that one of them is going to spot something and then they'll alarm. You know, and if I alarm today and warn you of a predator, you're going to possibly alarm tomorrow and warn me of a predator. So there's a benefit for all of them for doing that. Faraz asking, apart from cats, why don't we see a lot of animals sleeping like this? Faraz, I think partially because of what I was just saying is it's quite a vulnerable position to be in. You've got your nose and your ears and your eyes quite low to the ground, quite difficult to see over the grass and possibly see a predator approaching. And so I don't think that it's something that any animal would do, or any prey species would do for any length of time. Perhaps with the water at his back, he feels quite secure. He's only really got one direction that he has to keep a lookout in. But yeah, it isn't common to see antelope species lying like this. Really lovely to see the little baby jacana wandering around with its dad like that. They're such an unusual species of bird in many ways. We've talked a little bit already about the fact that the male raises the chicks, which is unusual in and of itself. But also, I'm sure many of you know this, but if the male feels threatened, he will tuck that little one under his wing and kind of run around with the baby held under his wing. And you will then see the baby's legs, because they have such big feet. So the legs and the feet will poke out. And it can look like the male jacana's got kind of four legs, but actually it's just the baby's legs sticking out from underneath the wing. They even do it if they have more than one chick. Sometimes you'll see a bunch of feet and legs sticking out from under the wing of a male jacana. It's very cute. Sweet. Look at those two impala. Maybe not so sweet. That one's come to harass him. Oh, why did you do that, boy? He was having such a nice little relax at the side of the water. That was completely unnecessary. Look at the difference in the condition of those two impala, though, just interestingly. So the one that was relaxing like that, I don't know if you can see, but he looks like his hips are sticking out a bit. His backbone is showing a bit more. He doesn't look as fat and healthy as the one that's in front of him now, the one that came up and harassed him. So that could be another reason why he was resting like that. He might just be in slightly poor condition and needing to just conserve energy a bit more. And hopefully that'll change, as we move into the rainy season and there's more food available. He should be able to pick up condition unless there's something really, really nasty wrong with him. But if it's just a case of feeling the effects of the dry season, then he should be able to recover from that. But he did just look, it wasn't super obvious. His ribs weren't showing through, but he definitely looked like his hip bones were a little bit more visible and his spine was kind of a little bit more visible than it should be. You can see how he's combing his teeth through his hair there. That's what I was talking about earlier, getting rid of ticks. And then they will do that to each other as well. In the hard to reach places, they will actually help each other out with getting rid of ticks. Oscar, you say you really love seeing all the details in their horns. Yeah, their horns have got these beautiful ridges on them, and each antelope species has a slightly different pattern to their horns. It really is. There's lots of intricate little details there that we tend to often miss when we just drive past them in the bush. They're so common that often we overlook impala and we don't notice all these finer details. So look at that. We had a bit of a headbutt and then what looked to me like a little bit of aloe grooming. Look there. He did his ear and now he's doing his friend's ear. Obviously, ears are places that they definitely won't be able to reach on their own bodies. And so it looks like these two are grooming each other's ears. So that's exactly what I was talking about. Getting rid of all the ticks and parasites, using that comb-like structure of the teeth. So Wendell is asking, do the males who are unsuccessful during the rut form brotherly herds like elephants? In a way, yes, Wendell, they do. In the rutting season, you will see large groups of bachelor impalas. We call them bachelor herds. And so you will have your typical herd of a bunch of females with a dominant male, and then hanging around close by, excuse me, you will sometimes have big herds of only males. And those herds can, they spar a bit with each other, but they also just spend time feeding and getting themselves into the best condition possible so that they can then go and challenge one of those dominant males that is holding a herd of females. So yes, at different times of the year, you will certainly see bachelor herds of impala. It's quite a common sight. This to me looks like a little bachelor herd, but at this time of the year, you will generally find that the impala herds have integrated a bit more. So it's quite common to see within a herd of females a number of different males. And then as the rutting season approaches, that changes, and the dominant male starts chasing all the other males out of his herd, and they form these little bachelor groups. Impalas don't like to be on their own. So a male that gets chased out of a herd will go and find a bachelor group to hang around in. He doesn't want to be caught on his own. With impalas, there's very much a safety in numbers kind of mentality. But these impala definitely look like they're feeling very relaxed around the water today. There's obviously no indication that there's any predators close by. Doesn't mean that they aren't there. It just means that the impala are not aware of any predators being close by. Oh, it looks like some woolly-necked storks in the distance there. And there's the female impala. Some white-faced whistling ducks. Lots going on at this waterhole this afternoon. Okay, well, we're going to pop over to town now and see if anything's happening at that waterhole. Maybe there's some good birds. We'll see what's happening there and leave these little white-faced whistling ducks to their bathing. We've still got our grazing waterbuck, enjoying the lush greenery in the pan or in the little waterhole. There's a little moorhen that he's just disturbed in the grass there. Just like we had our little bachelor grouping of impala at Tembe, we seem to have a bachelor grouping of waterbuck here. And that's, for similar reasons. Safety in numbers. If you're not a dominant male with a bunch of females, it makes more sense to just hang out with the other boys. Keep a lookout for each other. I can see some black-winged stilts in the far distance on the far edge of the pan there. They have the longest legs relative to body size of any bird species in the world. So black-winged stilts, yeah, those legs are super long compared to the size of their bodies. Can hear some rattling cisticolas and grey go-away birds alarming in the background. Not sure what that's all about. Could be something like a little mongoose that's upset them, or even a bird of prey flying in the sky above them could set them off, make them alarm. Oh, there we've got some red-knobbed coots. I think that is another first for my Live at the Waterhole bird list. So just behind the white-faced whistling ducks there is a red-knobbed coot. And something interesting just flew in behind them on the edge there. It's difficult to see against the soil. Can't hazard a guess right now. Just can't see enough detail on that bird. So Phil from Brighton says, I know South Africans dislike the hardy-dar, but are there any other birds with bird calls you find annoying or frustrating to hear after a while? So Phil, I must be the exception, but I love hardy-dars. I really do. I have a number of hardy-dars in my garden at home, and I just love them. I find them really pretty when the sun shines on their feathers. They've got beautiful iridescence, and yeah, their call doesn't annoy me. But many South Africans don't enjoy them and don't enjoy their calls. And then, do I find any calls annoying or frustrating to hear after a while? For me, natural sounds never really annoy me. I'm probably the exception because at home we have a pond, and when the guttural toads are calling all night, the rest of my family want to shoot them, and that sound puts me to sleep. I just love natural sounds, whereas the sound of an air conditioner or my pet hate is leaf blowers, but mechanical sounds annoy me intensely. Natural sounds I don't find annoying, so I'm trying to think of a bird call that I find annoying, and I really can't think of any. When you, I don't know if any of you have. I'm sure most of you are Safari Live followers and you watch the shows, and I'm sure some of you would have seen how the leopards get quite annoyed with the birds when they are stalking and the birds are alarming at them, and you'll often see a leopard flicking its tail around in annoyance. It's almost as if to say, look, birds, shut up. I'm showing you that I'm here, but just keep quiet. I'm trying to stalk this impala. And you'll often see a leopard flick that white tip of its tail at the birds. And I suppose for me, if I am trying to be quiet in the bush and maybe I'm tracking something or whatever, then the sound of a rattling cisticola giving away my presence, or as a guide, if you're trying to I wouldn't say sneak up on a rhino, but if you're tracking a rhino and you're trying to get your guests a nice view and you're trying to be still and not impact on the animal and be as sensitive to the animal as possible, and then the next minute the oxpeckers or a rattling testicular alarm and the animal gets a fright, that can be mildly annoying, I suppose. Um, but but for me, honestly, I don't really find natural sounds annoying. Um, I find them quite soothing. I find them quite meditative in a way. And yeah, I love the sounds of nature. So, sorry, very long winded answer to your question there, Phil. From Wendell, do birds use their sense of hearing all that much? Definitely. I don't know of any bird that doesn't have a good sense of hearing. And I'm sure that they use their sense of hearing to protect themselves, to tell them when there's intruders in their territory, to find a mate. Birds call to advertise their presence to females. So in order to find a mate, they need to be able to hear. So yeah, definitely, I think a sense of hearing is very, very important to almost every bird species. Um, Mercedes Bean, you asking, are green mambas as venomous as black mambas? Um, I think the venom is very similar. I think one of the reasons that you hear more of black mamba venom being, or you possibly hear of more deaths by black mambas is maybe because of the size of the black mambas. They would inject more venom, and also perhaps because they have a wider distribution than the green mamba, so people are going to encounter a black mamba more. But green mamba venom is very, very potent neurotoxin, and you don't want to get bitten by a green mamba. You need to get help very quickly or you will die, just as much as with a black mamba. So both of them have very, very potent venom, and it might just be that black mambas are encountered more often. But having said that, these snakes really would rather choose not to bite, and they flee from you before they turn and attack. And they're only really going to turn and attack if they feel like they have no other option, because venom is expensive to produce. It takes a lot of energy to produce venom, and because these snakes need that venom to catch their prey, they really don't want to waste it. And they're only going to waste it if they feel really threatened, really cornered, and they feel like there's no other choice for them. And that goes for both green mambas and black mambas. But both are very, very venomous snakes with potent venom. Catherine, you say nature sounds are the best to fall asleep to and wake up to. Yeah, I agree. I love the hardy-dars waking me up in the morning. It's kind of a natural alarm clock for me. And I love falling asleep too. We have these fruit bats in our gardens in KwaZulu-Natal, and they have a very loud call, very distinctive call, and it's very loud. And so I often fall asleep at night to the sound of the fruit bats. And if it's not the fruit bats, then it's the guttural toads and the painted reed frogs in my pond, and I just love it. Cat fan, you say lawnmowers and leaf blowers are your nuisance sound. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think leaf blowers are the worst invention ever invented. We need our leaves. They form mulch that is really, really important for nutrient cycling in the soil. They're an incredible weed prevention in your garden. Instead of raking all the leaves away or blowing them away, you could just chuck them on your garden beds, and they return nutrients to the soil and stop the leaves from growing. I have no idea why people use leaf blowers. It boggles my mind. Anyway, Spaz, you are asking. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Sorry, I'm really not sure if I am. Have you ever seen grey herons feeding on snakes before? I have heard that they sometimes take snakes. So I can't say I've seen grey herons feed on snakes. I'm absolutely sure that they would. They're very opportunistic. I have seen black-headed herons feeding on snakes, and they are a very similar species to the grey heron. From a distance, they're quite difficult to tell apart. They're the same size, but the black-headed heron is more of a grassland bird, whereas the grey heron is typically found very close to water. And I have often seen grey herons taking snakes. But I'm sure, if there was a snake coming down to the water and a grey heron happened to be close by, I can't imagine that it wouldn't make the most of an opportunity to catch a snake. But certainly black-headed herons do so regularly. I'm loving these little red-billed teals. To me, it almost looks like it's raining there now. There's lots of drops on the water, which is fantastic. If I'm seeing correctly, it means that the rain that we've been having in the east has actually moved over to the west of the country where it's really needed. So that would be very good news. I don't know if I'm seeing things, but to me it definitely looks like there's some drops falling on that water hole, which is great. I don't know what all of you think, but to me that looks like rain. Such good news for Tau. And that's right up on the Botswana border. So I know that I did look at the weather report yesterday on the TV, and it said that there was going to be quite widespread rain in Zimbabwe today. But it didn't mention bots. And to me, that definitely looks like rain, which is so lovely. Lovely for Botswana, lovely for those northwestern parts of South Africa. Just great for all the wildlife there. I can hear some lesser striped swallows calling in the background. They often make their nests on bird hides and in places close to human habitation. There's a black-winged stilt again. So Brenda's asking, in the city we feed ducks quite a bit of bread. Is it bad for the birds because the bread is very processed? Absolutely, Brenda. Bread is probably one of the worst things that you can feed ducks. It's probably far better for them to... Oh, I'm going to get back to your question now, Brenda, but there is an African comb duck, or what used to be called a knob-billed duck. That's another first for my live at the waterhole. bird species list. That's lovely. A beautiful male. They have quite iridescent plumage if the light shines correctly on those dark bits on the top of their bodies. You can see some green tinges there, and it really does get quite beautifully iridescent when the light is right. But that's lovely to see an African comb duck. They're one of those nomadic species we were discussing earlier that, they fly around from waterhole to waterhole, and when one dries up, they move to another part of the country where they can find water. So very much nomadic in places. In places where the water is permanent, they will be there permanently, but in other places, they will move. So Brenda, yes, bread is very bad to feed to any birds, really. Even, bread crumbs for pigeons and things like that. The bread is super, super processed, and really just fills their tummies with very little nutrients. And it's far better if you are going down to a pond or a park to maybe just go and buy a big bag of seed, bird seed, and rather feed that than bread, which really isn't very good for any bird or us even. Bread's not a particularly healthy food source for us. And if you have to feed bread, if it's the only thing you have available, then rather choose to feed brown bread that has a few seeds in it over white bread, which is just super, super processed and quite nasty. Beautiful view of that knob-billed duck or comb duck. We've had some good birds today. So only the males have that kind of fleshy protrusion on their bills. The female looks quite different. She has a normal looking face. So I see there's a question about the purpose of the knob on the bill. I've always been told that it just has to do with breeding and with looking bigger. But let me just see if I can find any other information for you on that. I'm not finding anything in my bird app. Let me see what Google says. Sorry, I've always thought, and I'm sure I've read somewhere, that it has to do with the males competing with one another and looking bigger, but let's see. So Google says it's to attract females and make the male appear more impressive, which is what I had always heard. Let's just see if there's anything else. Yeah, that seems to be the consensus in the various places I'm looking online as well, that it just is an evolutionary adaptation to make the males appear bigger and more impressive, and then hopefully attract more females. Can't see any other reason for having that weird structure on the bill. Some, I'm thinking of things like hornbills that have weird protrusions on the tops of their bills, and sometimes that can kind of amplify a call or make the call sound different or resonate the call. But I don't think that's the case with the knob-billed duck. I think it is purely just a way to attract females. And sometimes you'll find the knob is quite a bit smaller than that. So that is quite an impressive male. He's got a big knob on his bill, and hence probably has had a successful breeding season. But some of the males can have much smaller knobs. I suppose it depends on their age, and it can also be an indication of their body condition, whether they've had enough food and are healthy, and that can influence the size of the knob on the bill. And off he goes. It is quite unusual to see one without females in attendance, but we were quite zoomed in on him, so there may have been some females close by. There are lots of water birds hanging around here. Oh, that blacksmith lapwing dive bombed the poor black-winged stilt there. Lapwings can be so aggressive in their territories. Looks like the black-winged stilts have decided to rather go elsewhere. The ducks aren't too concerned, the white-faced whistling ducks, but they are quite a bit bigger than the lapwings, so they're probably not as intimidated by him. VC is asking, Wendell is asking, are these birds called stilts because their legs are so long? That's exactly where they get their name from. I did mention earlier, but you may not have been listening when I said it quite a bit earlier, that the black-winged stilt, relative to its body size, has the longest leg of any bird species in the world. And so the name stilt is definitely because of the long, thin legs that they have, which do kind of resemble stilts. Oh, I can hear sounds like a pearl-spotted owl calling in the background there. Phil from Brighton says, why do water birds hang around each other in considerable harmony when they are competing for the same food or water sources? Interesting question, Phil, but I think in many cases, many of these water bird species are quite specialized. So even though they might feed on similar food or the same food, they might feed in a slightly different part of the water or at a slightly different water level. But one of the main reasons why water birds would hang around in harmony is because it's similar to, a herd of zebra hanging out with a herd of wildebeest. It's just more eyes and ears, looking out for potential predators. And if you are there in greater numbers, the chances of you getting killed as opposed to, one of the other birds that is there is lower. So the more of you that there are there, the less chance you are to fall prey to predators. And the more of you there are there, the more eyes and ears and senses there are just looking out for those predators. And then surprisingly, many water birds actually don't feed on the same things. Some are vegetarian, some are feeding on water plants that are growing below the surface of the water. Some of them are looking for insects on the edges of the water. Some are going for fish. Some, like flamingos, are filtering out microorganisms in the soil, in the kind of muddy soil on the bottom of the pan. Spoonbills will be looking for little invertebrates and crustaceans that are in the mud. So there's many different things to feed on at a water hole, and not all of these birds will be eating the same things. Those Egyptian geese there, actually, you'll often find them far away from water feeding on seeds. So they'll go to where there's a grassland, and they'll actually, when the grass has got seeds heads on the top of the grass, they'll be plucking those off and feeding on the seeds. So yeah, many water birds have very different things that they're feeding on, and so they're not competing with one another. And the ones that do compete with one another, well, they still get the advantage of more eyes and ears looking out for predators. But you do get the odd skirmish, like that blacksmith lapwing earlier that didn't seem too happy about the black-winged stilts being close to him, and he chased them away. That does happen. But for the most part, why waste energy on doing that when you actually are benefiting from the presence of another water bird that isn't perhaps competing too badly with you for your resources? Caroline B., why do ducks and geese puff out their chests sometimes? I think it is just to make themselves look bigger. If you're a male and you are wanting to intimidate other males, you could do it for that reason. I've seen geese do it in response to humans, probably a defense mechanism. They're a bit nervous and they're puffing out their chests to try and make themselves look big and intimidating. So it is normally in response to competition from another male, or as a defense mechanism, just to try and make yourself look as big and scary as possible. There's a nice herd of blue wildebeest coming down, slowly making their way towards the water for a drink. And what they could be feeding on there, I have no idea. They are grazers, and there really doesn't look to be much grass growing there, unless there's some tiny green shoots starting to come through. Gosh, the time has gone quickly this afternoon. We only have 5 minutes left. There's a male waterbuck joining the little herd of wildebeest, probably also hanging around with them for protection. Well, to me, it doesn't look like it's raining there now, so I don't know if what we were seeing on the water earlier was just kind of fish rising. Definitely to me looked like raindrops falling on the water. But now everything seems quite calm. Maybe there was just a very, very quick passing shower. Oh, there's a little black crake. I love them. I love their luminous beaks and feet. Probably the most common of the crake species that we see. The other species popping up every now and then at these little pans and normally quite sought after by birders. Striped crakes and spotted crakes and Balian's crakes and African crakes, all being species that we don't see nearly as commonly as the black crake. And they tend to be quite nomadic and just pop up out of the blue. It's always a good thing to keep a lookout for. There's a little grey heron having a rest, having some time off from fishing, grooming himself. Oh, thanks, Cat Fan. It's been a great afternoon. We've had some really interesting discussions. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's my last one for a while. I'm going to be heading to Djuma next week, so I won't be on live at the waterhole for a little while. I'll be at Djuma. Really excited to be back there for a couple of weeks. Thoroughly looking forward to that. And yeah, then looking forward to being back on live at the waterhole when I get back from Djuma. But it's been a wonderful afternoon. I've really enjoyed all the bird sightings and all the interesting discussions that we've had. So thanks to everyone that's contributed to the discussion and asked some interesting questions today. Oh, what was that bird that flew past? Looked like quite a bright yellow bird that flew past there. Anyway, we've only got a minute to go, guys, so I'm going to say goodbye. It's been absolutely wonderful having you on board with us this afternoon. Had some interesting sightings, and I've really, really enjoyed the time. And wherever you are in the world today, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Please try and catch the game drives later on this afternoon. And thanks so much for being with us. It's been fantastic being on board with you. Goodbye for now.